Okay, we're going to go ahead and start with these data points that I have. I've put in my pressures, my volumes, and also my uncertainties. So the first thing I want to calculate is a K value. And for air to follow Boyle's law, remember pressure times volume is just K, so I'm going to equals my pressure number times my volume number. And then I'll just go ahead and I'll fill that down. I might as well get my percent uncertainty first, because I never know if I'm actually going to need that. So since I multiplied pressure and volume, I must be adding their percent uncertainty. So this one equals the uncertainty in the volume, the percent one, plus the percent uncertainty in the pressure. And I can go ahead and fill those down for any time I might need them. I also want to maybe back calculate and get my absolute uncertainty on the K values. To do that, I'm going to use my actual K value in percent. So this equals my percent, change it back to a decimal, so divide by 100. But I'm going to multiply it now times this K value here. And I can fill those down. I basically have all the calculations needed to make my pressure volume graph. So what I'm going to do is go under Insert, and I got all these graphs I could choose from. Please don't select the line graph. In science, we plot data as points. You don't plot it as lines, so I want to scatter, and there's all these choices under scatter. I really want just the points. So I'll click on that, and notice it gives me a blank graph. Sometimes Excel tries to guess which data you want to graph, and so it puts stuff on here. I preferably don't like that because sometimes it guesses wrong, and then I end up deleting it all and having to restart anyways. One thing I want you to notice is this though. I have the graph area selected. Then I also have up here 3 tabs under Chart Tools. If I just left click off this graph, like here, notice those 3 tabs go away. So if you're ever looking for those tabs, you gotta click back on the graph, and there they go. Under the Design tab, I want to go to Select Data, and I'm going to Add. These are going to be my pressure volume data and X values. So if I click, if I click on this button, it'll allow me to select my X values. So I'm going to just move this over here. I have to figure out, am I going to be selecting my volumes or my pressures? Well, in my experiment, I actually decided which volumes I was going to measure the air at, and then I looked at the pressure to see what the pressure readout was. So I picked the volumes, the readout I saw was the pressure. Since I picked the volumes, they are the independent variable, and they go on my x-axis. So if I just click and hold with the left mouse button, I'll highlight all my volume data. Be careful, do not highlight this VML box, or it will throw off the graph. So I hit enter, and I hit this button, and similarly, I have to select my pressure values, making sure I do not select the text. And notice it puts it in a graph for me. I hit OK. It allows me to change up any mistakes I made if I want to delete it or if I want to add more data. But right now I don't want to do that, so I'll hit OK. And now I'm going to try to play with this graph a little bit. First off, I hate grid lines, so I'm just going to left click on them and hit delete to get rid of them. Grid lines aren't really that helpful for anything. A graph is really meant to show you the trend of data. How is it varying with each other? How are your two variables varying? It's not about exact values, which is what grid lines might be for. I might use a graph to estimate a value, but that's about it. It's really not for exact numbers. So grid lines don't add to the graph. First thing I see though is I need some axis titles. That's under the Layout tab. Axis titles, I have to do it twice. Once for the horizontal, once for the vertical. So horizontal, I had volume. I'll just go here, title below axis, and type in volume with my units. Now it's down below, so I can go to axis titles again, vertical axis. I know there's some selections here. I just take the first one, rotated title, and this is pressure, kilopascals. And now I've cleaned it up a little bit. One thing I do notice is that my maximum here is 200 and my maximum here is roughly 250. I don't need to go to 300 on the x-axis. I don't need to go to 250 on the y-axis. So to change that, I'm going to left click on the x-axis. While it's selected, right click, format axis. I've got all these things I could change. One thing that's very helpful is where the vertical axis crosses. Sometimes Excel moves this y-axis over in the middle, and if you want to force it to the left, you can change this value here. I'm just going to leave it at automatic. But here's what I want to concentrate on. I want to make this maximum value 250. So under maximum, I go to fixed, and I'm just going to type in 250. And now it's stretched my graph a little bit. And the same thing here, I will left click, right click, format axis. Now I want the max to be 200. So maximum's fixed at 200. And it makes it nice and stretched. But by doing so, I threw in a bunch of numbers here. And it looks kind of busy to me. So I want to actually make it maybe every 40 draw a number. I got the axis selected. I'll right click again. Format axis. My major unit right now is 20. Every 20 it shows a tick. I want to change that to 40. And now it sort of got rid of them and cleaned it up a little bit. One thing I can do is if I just left click on the chart area, it selects this box, and I can sort of stretch this. Really use the size of the graph. Make it look nice and neat. If you ever see it and it looks like it's running into the words here, then I can always move it in a little bit. But now it looks like a decent graph. I want to add a line to this. So I'm going to left click on the points. Now they're all selected. And I will right click. Add trend line. When I do that, you notice it tries to guess and say, oh, this is linear data. That doesn't work real well. I want to change the format of my line, and I have all these choices. I can sit here and play around with whichever ones look the best to me. But what is even better than that is if I kind of already have an idea what this relationship should be, pressure volume I know is an inverse relationship, I want to select the one that works with that. In this case, it's power. And there's some other options I could do. This is a great one, display equation on chart. Notice it just placed it down here. R squared sometimes doesn't add to the graph. And if you don't think it adds, don't select it. I'm going to select it just so that we can see where it puts it and stuff. But I don't know that it really helps me much. But I'll place it on there. Maybe it's going to help in my analysis to show that it fits pretty well. Now that I think about it, it actually does add to my graph. So I'll hit close. But it just threw the line and the equation stuff in my line and I can't read it. So if I just left click, I can select this and move it wherever I want. And I think, geez, that's kind of small. So with it selected, I'm going to go to home. And I'm just going to change the size of the font maybe to 12 point or something. Now I can really see that. One of my pet peeves is this thing here where they try to tell you what the line is. So if I left click on that, it selects the key. And I left click one more time, it selects just that power PV line. Hit delete, and now that's gone. Okay, there's one thing I have left to do. I am not plotting y's versus x's like this thing says. I'm actually plotting pressure versus volume. So to change that, I'll left click on the equation box. If I left click once more, it actually puts a cursor in there, and I can type and change the y to a p and the x to a v. And this could give me some analysis to what I'm doing. I'm going to drag the graph down a little bit here for something later that we're going to do. But Boyle's law says that pressure is proportional to the inverse of the volume. In other words, volume to the -1 power. Notice this line is very close to volume to the -1 power. And this might be the constant that shows the proportionality. That could give me some maybe analysis in my conclusion. As well as, maybe in this case, the R squared will help me and tell me how well the points fit the line. One thing that I have to calculate here is the average K value and the standard deviation. So I'm going to just put those labels down here. But I want to actually type in to Excel to have it calculate for me. So I'm going to click on this cell where I want the average to be. I'm going to type equals, type out the word average. When I do so, these boxes come up and you can click on this if it helps you out. I don't usually use them. I'm going to use the open parenthesis above the 9. And I'm going to click and hold with the left mouse button, selecting the data that I want the average to be calculated for. So I want these values. Be careful, don't select the text for K value. Right now I can click, or I can put in a close parenthesis, or I can just hit the enter key. And there we go, I got the average. Similarly, for standard deviation, equals STDEV. I'll use the open parenthesis, and I will highlight with the left mouse button the values I want the standard deviation to be calculated from. Careful, don't highlight the average value or the K value. And if I hit enter, now I have a standard deviation. This is going to help for the next graph. So I need to set up two lines. One is the average K plus standard deviation. And the other line I'm going to make is average K minus standard deviation. Okay, so to actually make those formulas, I go into this box at equals. I want the average K, which is right here. I'll click on it. But it's not locked right now. When I do a fill down later, it's going to try to take the box below and the box below. So I want to lock this average box. I need some dollar signs around my H and my 12. A quick way to do that, instead of typing them in, is once I've selected H12, I'm going to press the F4 key. And it puts the dollar signs in. And I want to add now the standard deviation, so I'll left click on that. I also want to lock that box with dollar signs, so I'll press F4 and enter. Now when I fill this down, I'm trying to make a straight line. These should all be the same value. And I did it okay. Over here I'm going to do something similar, but the only difference is I'm going to subtract the standard deviation. These are going to set up some lines for bounds for my K values. I'm going to look at all my K values, and in a perfect world or an ideal gas they would be a straight line. Of course my K values are going to bounce around. I want to see if there's any points that are more than one standard deviation away from the mean K value. So here's how I can do this. I've got to create another chart. Insert, scatter, points. Okay, another blank graph. So I need to select my data. First thing I'll put on there are my K values. My X values are going to be each data point number. That's why I need this column here. So I'm going to select all those. Careful, don't select any text. And I'm going to find the column where my K values are, making sure I don't select text or the average. And it just puts them in a big scatter here on the graph. But now I want to add my top and bottom lines. My line that's a standard deviation above the mean, and then my line that's a standard deviation below the mean. So I'm going to put add. This is average plus standard deviation. My X values are the same, 1 through 10. My Y values now, though, are the same value here, average K plus standard deviation. And when I do that, notice it sort of makes a line out of these red boxes. I'll do a similar thing with the average subtracting the standard deviation. X values again are 1 through 10. The Y values then would be this minus standard deviation. Okay, I got my upper and lower bounds, and I can do some cleanup with this graph. First of all, get rid of those grid lines. Second of all, go to the Layout tab and let's put some axis titles. On the x-axis, that is my data point number. And on the y-axis, that's my K value. One thing I notice is that I only have points 0 through 10. I didn't go up to 12. So I can left click on this axis, right click for format axis, and change my maximum to a fixed 10. And there they are. I'm going to just drag this to make it a little bigger so I can see it's a little bit better. Okay, so again, in science we plot our data as points. So I want the K values to stay as these blue points. But these aren't really points. These are lines that I created for analysis. Similar to like this graph, that line wasn't obtained experimentally. We calculated that later. It wasn't really something in the lab. So these things also need to be lines. I'll left click to select them. Right click to go Format Data Series. Under Marker Options, I don't want any. Line Color, Solid Line. And I can change the color here if I want to. And the style I'm just going to leave the same. And if I hit Close, now I've got a straight line where I used to have points. Maybe that clashes, so I can go back to this. And line color, maybe I'm going to change it to black or something like that. So now I can see this better. Same thing down here. I'll left click to select. Right click to go to Format Data Series. Marker Options none. Line color, I want a solid line. And maybe the style now I want to make this the dashed line, so I can tell those two apart. And if I look, now I'm missing a title here. Maybe I could type that in my report. I can see which K values are one standard deviation away from the mean, and I can talk about that in my conclusion. So we've got several different ways to look at how our data went. We've got these average values, we've got our uncertainties, we've got the equation here, how well it follows the predicted line, our squareds, and we've got an analysis here that shows how many standard deviations, well, are they within one standard deviation from the mean.